This is the third in my series of posts on a visit to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston last August. I've posted earlier on my 5 favorites from the Gardner Museum, but those favorites were chosen from artworks that I found on the net. In August 2020, I visited the Gardner for the first time in decades. For all the posts that I've written on the Gardner, click Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in the tag cloud on dianedurantewriter.com. This post is all about the Raphael Room, and for purposes of the post, I've rearranged the artwork into chronological order and I've added captions. Both of those would appall Isabella Stewart Gardner, whose eccentric way of arranging a museum did not include the use of labels, or grouping chronologically. This head imitates Greek art of the Archaic period, which would be 600 to 500 BC. But as the Gardner site notes, it's actually a Greco-Roman creation of the 1st or 2nd century AD, so maybe 800 years later than it's purporting to be. But every so often, old fashion comes back into fashion. On the left is a Virgin and Child from the mid-15th century. It's an example of the suite style, which became popular in Florence after Donatello created his Pazzi Madonna. On the Pazzi Madonna and its effect on Florentine artists, see my book Innovators in Sculpture, Chapter 8. On the right is an Annunciation painted around 1487 by another Florentine painter. The floor is a bravura illustration of mathematically calculated linear perspective, but by means of the placement of the vanishing point, the artist also uses that technique to focus your eye on the interaction between the angel and the Virgin. See Chapter 18 in my book Innovators in Painting. So if you imagine the vanishing point not here but over here, it would shift the relationship between those two. Next up on the left is Crivelli's St. George Slaying the Dragon from 1470. Crivelli's figures are sometimes odd, but I really like the sharpness of his detail. Look, for instance, at the horse's head, which you can see better if you click on the link in the blog post to the Gardner site. And on the right side of this slide is a work that's not cataloged as a Crivelli, but it's got much the same hard-edged, very precisely detailed style. On the left in this slide is one of many cassoni in the Gardner. A cassone was a marriage chest, usually painted, gilded, inlaid, and or carved. It was filled with items that were given by the bride's family to the new couple, and these items would have been more or less valuable depending on the family's wealth. After the wedding, the cassone was usually placed at the foot of the couple's bed. And on the right is a painting by Piero del Pollaiuolo. Piero and his brother Antonio reportedly carried out dissections to improve their knowledge of anatomy, which was a very shocking thing in 15th century Italy. The 3/4 view used by artists in Northern Europe gave much more scope for showing facial anatomy correctly than this portrait does, because it's of the profile type that had long been the standard in Italy. And here we have another tour de force of perspective. This one is by Botticelli. Botticelli fell under the spell of the fanatical Dominican monk Girolamo Savonarola in the 1490s. Vasari, who wrote a biography of Botticelli, doesn't confirm that Botticelli threw his paintings into Savonarola's bonfire of the vanities, but it is possible. In any case, Botticelli's later works, including this one, are dated after Savonarola's death in 1498. This is a portrait by Raphael of Tommaso Inghirami. It exists in 2 versions, this one and one that's in the Palazzo Pitti in Florence. As far as I can tell, no one knows whether they're both original Raphaels or if one is a copy of the other. Raphael is best known today for the School of Athens, but he could certainly produce a hell of a portrait. Okay, switching to the architecture and decoration on the 2nd floor of the Gardner. Look at the decoration in the corners and along the wainscot. I don't know what that is made out of, and I have never seen anything quite like it. If you were doing it in molded plastic, it would be easy. But when the Gardner's palace was being constructed around 1903, there was no molded plastic. You could do this with plaster, but it's very complex and extremely well preserved for plaster, so I would really like to know what that is. On the right is a fireplace in the Raphael Room. And at the very end, the windows in the Raphael Room, which are outlined in these elaborate fabrics and accents. And the picture on the right is the view of the courtyard from the second floor. That's all for this week. There will be another post on the Gardner next week. Meanwhile, DianeDuranteWriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, Central Park, and my many other obsessions. To join the free Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's online or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards. I really appreciate that by means of the tip jar on DianeDuranteWriter.com. Thank you as always for listening.